Hello, I'm Amy Thompson in HUD's Office of Public Affairs. Thank you for joining us as we remember a day that really changed everything for us as a nation. It's hard to believe it's already been 17 years. For many of us, the memories of that day remain so vivid. Many of you were here at HUD 17 years ago. Regardless of where you were, we all have our own reflections of a day that will forever be remembered by two numbers, 9/11. Our first speaker was practicing medicine 17 years ago, and we've asked him to come and begin today's reflection. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Ben Carson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, welcome today as we reflect on one of America's very darkest days, along with Pearl Harbor, a day that really, I think, is stamped into all of our memories. And, the startling images that forever changed the skyline of New York City. And probably everybody remembers what they were doing that day. I remember coming out of the operating room, and everybody was talking about a plane that had crashed into the World Trade Center. And I went up to my office, and everybody was gathered around the television, see what was going on. And as we were watching, a second plane hit. And that's when we knew this was not an accident. And those deplorable attacks also really changed us as a nation. The Pentagon was set ablaze. There was the crash in Pennsylvania that created sacred ground where people can go to reflect on what it means to be an American. And we lost nearly 3,000 Americans that day. And remember those who perished that day, those who rushed into harm's way, and the families and friends that they left behind. But also remember that there are thousands of people who were impacted on a chronic basis with diseases, with precursors to cancers that are impacting people even today. And we also remember those who joined the battle against terrorism and who gave all that they had, in many cases, even their lives, in defense of our nation. And for many Americans, 9/11 is history. It's not a memory. For today's college students, they were young children. Our oldest high school students were toddlers at the time, and of course anybody born less than 17 years ago, they weren't even around. So with each passing year, we do have a challenge of keeping the memory alive. And even though those events still impact each one of us today, we have to remember to portray it the right way. Let us hold on to the memory of that day 17 years ago when we all became one. That was really the amazing thing. Regardless of race, politics, national origin, income, it didn't matter. For those days, weeks, and even months afterwards, we stood as one. It was really an amazing sensation to see the lack of conflict disappear. It reminded me of the Will Smith movie Independence Day, when the aliens were coming, and all of a sudden, the Israelis and the Palestinians were friends. The Americans and the Russians were friends. Everybody was friends because they recognized that there was really a bigger enemy. And I often think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just be like that all the time? And we didn't need some tragedy and some horrible threat to draw us together. We're all accustomed to patriotism on the 4th of July, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. But on this day, the flags that fly in our homes and that are strung along the highway overpasses remind us that out of the ashes came forth the rebirth of our pride. Every generation has a defining moment. There can be no mistake that 9/11 was one of ours. On this solemn day, it is our obligation to remember and perhaps to reclaim the solidarity that bound us together as a nation nearly a decade and a half ago. So please join me in a moment of silence for those we lost. And on behalf of the President, the Vice President, the entire administration, and a grateful nation, I want to thank each one of you for your service. Now, working at HUD is not the easiest thing to do. I always say we have the ugliest building but the best employees. And, a lot of times it seems like a thankless job that you're doing, but do remember you're impacting thousands and millions of individuals, and it's incredible work, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge Assistant Secretary Neil Ratcliffe's team in CPD. Stan Gamont and the team had a tremendous role in rebuilding Lower Manhattan after the attack, so please join me. Back in 2015, as we were marking the 50th anniversary of the department, we sat down with Secretary Mel Martinez and talked to him about his time. And of course, September 11, 2001 was during his tenure. As part of today's remembrance, we would like to offer you his personal reflections. Let's watch.
It was an unforgettable day. And then looking out my window for 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, and you can see Washington National, Reagan National, and there was just no planes there. I mean, it was an empty, you can look out that window on any given day when you look at this angle of the HUD building, and you can see planes in and out of Reagan National all day long, every moment of the day. And there wasn't a movement on that tarmac. There wasn't an airplane to be seen, and that was just eerie. It really was. And then I remember on September 12th driving to work and going by the Pentagon and seeing the smoke coming out of that. It was really incredible. The most memorable thing, well, so many of them are memorable, but then the Friday of that week, I think 9/11 was on a Tuesday, and Friday of that week we had a cabinet meeting. And then from the cabinet meeting, we proceeded to the National Cathedral for the National Day of Prayer. And all of the living presidents were there, and all of the Congress and the cabinet gathered together, Supreme Court, everyone. And it was really quite a moving day. Of course, I think the nation shared in that moment by television, and it was really quite a privilege to be there in person and to be a part of such a historic, difficult but historic time in our nation. With all that destruction that happened and all of the loss of business activity, I mean, the small flower shops and the little bagel shop down the street, I mean, all of these little businesses that lived in that were all of a sudden shuttered. And so this infusion of cash, I remember working with Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki, Senator Clinton and Senator Schumer, particularly to bring the money back into New York, and then of course to begin the reconstruction part. And the other thing that was really quite compelling was also working on the issues relating to the insurance claims that arose and all those other, I mean, it was just a whole composite of complicated issues that rose from that. But getting the money to New York, getting it there quickly, going through the morass of a structure like HUD to get the money out the door and do it timely where it would matter was something that we really focused on. I'm really proud of what the people here at HUD did on that. There's another angle to the story too, which is the people of HUD in New York. We had 300 or 400 people that worked only 2 or 3 blocks from ground zero, as we came to know it. And these people, were frightened. I mean, these were very, very frightening days. And I think it's easy to forget just how very scared people were to be in a federal building. And so I remember going there to encourage our people, to give them a little bit of a bucking up, and also to thank them for their sacrifice and their willingness to show up and do the work of HUD, which was so important at that time, So those were really difficult moments. But I really had great respect and admiration for the people that worked in this department, and they still do. And I think that heightened the dedication of the people, because they were showing up for work and getting back at it, even though it felt unsafe and it didn't feel good to be back in that neighborhood so close to where so much tragedy had happened. There was no Republican or Democrat at that time. We were all Americans trying to help our brothers and sisters that were in pain. And a city, the greatest city in our country perhaps, the center of business and commerce, a symbol to the world, and we wanted to get it back right. And so HUD was the vehicle by which that happened.
Of course, the events of that day touched all of us, whether we were HUD employees or not. But the folks in our regional office in New York were literally blocks away from ground zero. Our reflections today would be incomplete without our team in New York City. So let's bring in our regional office through video teleconferencing. Joining us is our regional administrator, Lynn Patton. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Amy. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, HUD leadership and distinguished guests. I am confident I speak for the entire office when I say that it's an honor to participate in this solemn observation, but it's even more of an honor to obviously represent Region 2 during this time. As President Bush so famously said nearly 17 years ago tomorrow, our way of life and our very freedom came under attack, designed to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But I think we all know now that what it did was the exact opposite. It steeled our resolve, it fortified our nation, and it reinstilled our faith and our commitment to God and country. As many of you know, our HUD Region 2 office sits only a few blocks from the World Trade Center. Many of those who you see behind me were there that day and were forced to flee for their safety and their lives, including my colleague Eliza Lowe, from whom you will hear momentarily. And while I would never purport to speak to that for them, I cannot help but acknowledge that we got 100% participation this morning for our National Disaster Vibrant Response Tabletop exercise in recognition of National Disaster Preparedness Month. Specifically how each program area would react and respond to the events of a truck bomb and a NYCHA property in Harlem. Sadly, because of 9/11, these drills remain important. And yes, while the employees behind me work at HUD, they are citizens of New York and New Jersey first and foremost. And while HUD is clearly not a first responder, many of these employees who are New York and New Jersey citizens were that day, helping each other, helping strangers out in the street. And I'm honored to work alongside each and every one of them every single day. There is no New Yorker or New Jerseyite who doesn't either know somebody who was murdered that day or know someone who lost a loved one. Tomorrow, I have the honor once again to attend the Staten Island 9/11 Memorial as a guest of the mayor and the Staten Island Borough President. And I cannot leave here without recognizing and sharing that Staten Island, lost every single member of every single firehouse in their borough. Think about that for a minute. And it's such a powerful experience to sit alongside their wives, spouses, their children, some of whom they never knew, born after they died, their grandchildren, who they will never, of course, know. Over 343 New York City firefighters gave their lives that day. And over 2,977 civilians also lost their lives that day, too. And I think it truly drives home the pure devastation of this attack when you realize that one of those citizens of the terrorist attacks was only just identified this past August as Scott Michael Johnson, a 26-year-old security analyst who worked at Keefe, Burrett and Woods. 17 years after his murder, he was only just now recognized a few months ago and identified for his family. And, with that said, one of the citizens who obviously worked here at HUD is sitting alongside of me, who was there that day and has come forward and is willing to share her difficult story with the other employees of HUD. And it's an honor for me to introduce Eliza Lowe from our Office of Inspector General. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone has a unique story about 9/11, especially for those of us who were here at 26 Federal Plaza that day. As mentioned by many others already, World Trade Center was and still is just blocks away from Ground Zero. All of us who were here that day witnessed the attack to both towers, and we saw it, witnessed it very clearly. At first, there was lots of confusion. I'm honored that I'm asked to share my story because there's so many stories in New York City, and I'm sure there were tons of other stories that are more touching and more worthwhile than mine. But I'm honored that I could represent Region 2 to share mine.
Thank you.
We were hoping it was an accident, but of course, later on we found out that it wasn't. I remember calling my husband from my office. He was an active NYPD detective at that time. And right after 9/11, he was one of many first responders who worked at Ground Zero and throughout New York City for 6 months. Soon after that, he joined the counterterrorism unit and continued to try to protect our country and our city, along with many others. At that time, he told me not to wait. Don't wait for any directions. Just take time off and get off the building right away, get out of Manhattan right away. Because he said, even if we're not certain at that time what it was, downtown would be so chaotic and devastating. There's no way that I could get out if I don't get out right away. He told me that bridges and tunnels may be closed very soon. And surely he was correct. And at that time, we also found out from the office that it was confirmed it wasn't an accident, and we were instructed to walk down 32 flights to leave the building. Despite the devastation, as New Yorkers and many others, everyone walked down the stairs in a very orderly fashion. But everyone looked very sad, trying to understand what has just happened. We also could not contact friends and family to find out whether they were safe that day because there was no signal for cell phones. At that time, I had to drive to work due to a suppressed immune system after a bone marrow transplant. And luckily, because I was driving to work, I was able to leave the city. But within minutes after I got on the Manhattan Bridge, all bridges and tunnels were closed. I was the only one driving on the expressway and could not stop crying when I saw the collapse of the South Tower from the rear mirror in my car. Most of us did not return to work for a few weeks because Federal Plaza was closed. But my director, our DEC lead attorney, 2 team leaders and I from the New York deck, and many other essential employees from our other offices reported to the Newark office. just days after 9/11. And we continue to try to do our job, even though everybody was so sad and not certain was what else may happen. Federal Plaza was reopened 3 weeks later. It was not easy to return to downtown so soon, but everybody did. Everybody tried their best and returned to the office right away. Days after we returned to the building, we saw smoke coming out of ground zero, and staff started coughing from the dusty smoke. Being concerned with our health, on top of the difficulty of commuting to the office, our director spoke with headquarters and requested to allow us to telework 2 days a week based on reasonable accommodation. Thankfully, headquarters agreed, and it at least helped some of us to be able to cope with that and continue to try to come in as much as we could to do our job. We've come a long way since then. With the completion of the Freedom Tower a few years ago, we are once again reminded again of the resilience and courage of so many New Yorkers and everybody who came back to the city with us. We can see the Freedom Tower clearly from our office window, but instead of allowing the negativity and sadness to overpower us, we're reminded of how precious life is and continue to maintain a healthy approach to life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eliza.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Eliza, for sharing your stories. 17 years ago, our own Brian Montgomery was working for President Bush at the White House. He was with the president at the moment of those attacks. I'd like to welcome our Assistant Secretary for Housing and FHA Commissioner Brian Montgomery to offer his unique point of view of that day.
Thank you very much, Amy, and greetings to everyone out there watching online, and to Len and all your team up there in New York. Very moving portrayals of what happened on that day. I want to thank Public Affairs and others for organizing this event. I think just about everybody in this room knows that I previously served as FHA Commissioner from 2005 to 2009. A very interesting period in our history that spanned 2 presidents and the largest housing crisis in our history. But as Amy mentioned, prior to my service at HUD, I served in the Executive Office of the President as a Deputy Assistant to the President, first as Director of the Office of Presidential Advance from 2001 to 2003, followed by heading up the Office of Cabinet Affairs from 2003 to 2005. Now, I have to say, being the Director of Presidential Advance is a remarkable position with the Executive Office of the President and is tasked with overseeing and planning all presidential events outside of the White House, including overseas events. Obviously, this involves a lot of interaction with the Secret Service, National Security Council, White House Military Office, and others. While running the Advance Office is one of the more physically demanding jobs in the White House, where we typically work sometimes 7-day work weeks, I did very much enjoy traveling with President Bush to just about every state in the Union in more than 35 countries. I logged almost 1 million miles on Air Force One and got to travel extensively on the helicopters and numerous motorcades. Now, people often ask me if I miss traveling on Air Force One, and my answer is very simple. Are you crazy? Of course I miss it. Who wouldn't? I mean, Hollywood has portrayed Air Force One in dozens of movies, but I have to say, by far the appropriately named thriller with Harrison Ford as president was the best recreation of the interior of the plane, except I can now admit there is no escape pod. But there are comfortable captain's chairs, a large and now fully connected conference room, amazing food, which, by the way, we all got billed for, including the president, first-run movies, an amazing view from the flight deck, and it arrived on time 100% of the time. Well, later today, I will travel on American Airlines and hope for the best. Well, not surprisingly, we had many serious days aboard Air Force One, and yes, we did manage to have a few fun ones. Looking back on one of them, I recall waking from a long nap after our last stop on a long European trip, only to discover that I was completely alone. I walked back to the next staff area, and it too was empty. So for a brief moment, I thought I was caught up in an episode of The Twilight Zone, so I hurried to the front of the plane. And as I passed the conference room, I could hear a lot of laughter. I barely opened the door and looked in, and the entire staff, including the President and Mrs. Bush, were crammed in there watching a movie, one that today has quite a following. Any guesses? Well, it's none other than The Big Lebowski. I swear you cannot make this stuff up. On a more serious note, there's one memory that stands apart from all others, and that's what I want to share with you today. Well, on the morning of September 11th, we left the Colony Inn Resort and headed toward Emma Booker Elementary School, where the president was going to talk about the signature proposal of his young presidency, education reform. Well, as we pulled into the front of the school, one of my White House colleagues, who was on his cell phone behind me, leaned forward and said that an airplane had just hit the World Trade Center. Now, I'm not a pilot, but like a lot of you, I know enough about commercial aviation to immediately be suspicious. When we slowed to a stop and jumped from the motorcade, Mark Rosenkerr, who was the head of the White House military office at the time, known as WAMO, intercepted me to say that Dr. Condoleezza Rice, who was a national security advisor at the time and back in Washington, D.C., needed to immediately talk to the president, and we were to take him to a holding room. This was also about the time that I figured I should start keeping some notes of what was called the mini schedule that you carried in your pocket, and I noted on there 8:55, first notice from Bartlett. That was Dan Bartlett. Following a very quick greeting out front with the school principal and several students, who, by the way, were completely oblivious to what was happening 1,000 miles to the north, we went to the holding room to get on the secure telephone. "Get Dick on the phone as soon as possible," the president said immediately after he hung up the phone with Dr. Rice. It sounded as real in my memory just now as it did that long ago morning, and surprisingly vivid now years later. Well, candidly, when the second plane hit the other tower, I began to seriously wonder what that afternoon might bring. Well, the events of that day are obviously known to all of us, more so than others. But for our part, we quickly left Florida and ultimately headed toward Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. Here I made some other notes after talking. We were airborne at 9:45. I intercepted the president outside the staff room. We chatted briefly. Parts of it I didn't write down, but others that I did. Also, we were keeping some notes after talking to the military aide. He was giving us some idea where we should head, that we ultimately wanted to go towards somewhere with a secure bunker, and that the president wanted, who ultimately became the deputy director of the CIA, who was traveling with us, to place a phone call for the president to Director Tenet at the time. Well, as soon as we landed in Shreveport, the WAMO director, Rosenkerr, and I headed off the rear steps to get ahead of the president. We were met by the base commander, who resembled the George C. Scott character General Buck Turgison from the Cold War era movie Dr. Strangelove. He looked at the two of us and asked us who's in charge. Before we could respond, he pointed to several rows of B-52 bombers parked wingtip to wingtip with their engines running. "You see those planes?" he gestured. "Every one of them is loaded with nukes. Just tell me where you want them." Well, we weren't quite sure if he was joking or not. And while I had my own opinion as where the base commander should drop them, President Bush was now descending the stairs. So we quickly pointed to the president and told the general, "Don't tell us, tell him." And it appeared the general did as we instructed. Well, obviously the base personnel didn't have too much time to plan for a motorcade, so we piled into sort of a makeshift Humvee convoy and headed toward the base headquarters building. After President Bush had several secure telephone conversations, each of us were given an opportunity to call our loved ones, but we were to not tell them where we were. Before departing Barksdale, President Bush delivered brief remarks to the press pool, which was traveling with us. Now, remarks to the press pool are not that unusual, but at that moment in time, it signaled so much more. Not only was the president providing immediate reaction to the attacks witnessed that morning, he was addressing the nation and showing the continuity of our American government, and that was important for all Americans to hear and see. Minutes later, we again took to the skies. As we headed toward Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, or STRATCOM as it is called, I vividly recall the CIA employee who was traveling with us on overnight visits so he could provide the president's daily brief, saying, when asked, without hesitation, who the culprit was behind the attacks. UBL, he said, UBL. The person he was referring to was naturally Osama bin Laden. Well, despite our desire to land unnoticed by the public, to our surprise, our landing at Offutt Air Force Base was shown live on every TV network. At the time, Air Force One was not yet equipped with satellite TV, so we could only make out grainy images on the TVs as we passed over a populated area. Now, after the attacks of that morning, every local Omaha TV station headed toward the front gates of Offutt Air Force Base, which provided the perfect backdrop for their stories. To this day, I can only imagine the look of surprise on the faces of the cameramen when they looked up and saw Air Force One descend from the skies right in front of them. As we motorcaded from the plane, it was obvious the base was on full alert as dozens of heavily armed airmen protected our route. We slowed to a stop in front of a 5-story office building, but instead of entering the front door, we were directed across the street to what looked like a small concrete bunker with a door. 2 well-armed airmen waved us in, and down we went and went and went. I will readily admit that I never thought I'd bear witness to the Strategic Air Command Nerve Center that I'd only seen in fictional movie portrayals. But there was before me, many floors underground, inside what was a small city. Well, shortly after our arrival in secure video teleconference meetings with National Security Advisor Rice and members of the cabinet, President Bush had finally worn down the objections of the Secret Service and Vice President Cheney, and we left Offutt heading back to join Base Andrews. En route to D.C., I recall seeing 2 F-16 fighter jets just off each wingtip. One of my colleagues leaned over and said something that none of us had considered, and that is we are the only airplane with mostly civilian passengers flying within the entire United States. As we all know, earlier in that day, several thousand commercial airlines were immediately ordered to land at the nearest airport shortly after the World Trade Center attacks. This is my note at the time when we were wheels down at Joint Base Andrews and at 7:05 back at the White House. Well, as we boarded the helicopters at Andrews and headed toward the White House, you could see large plumes of smoke rising from the Pentagon. Just 3 miles from here, within sight of many of the offices in this building. While I wasn't riding in Marine One, I could sense the president's anger when he saw the smoke with his own eyes. Later that night, President Bush addressed the nation, whose citizens were still reeling from the horrific events of that day. I managed to squeeze in a couple of hours of sleep at home and headed back to the White House. Even though I arrived before 6 a.m., the White House was still on full alert and bustling with staff. But we, like a lot of you, were still in the mental mode of what could be next. But with F-16 fighters and J-stars in command of the Washington, D.C. airspace, and every commercial airliner still grounded, we felt secure that further threats from the sky were not likely. I soon received a call from the Deputy Chief of Staff advising me that the President wanted to visit the Pentagon later that day. Within half an hour, we had assembled a site survey team consisting of Secret Service agents and WAMO personnel, and we headed to the Pentagon. The crash site, as we know, was the very embodiment of America's military might, which was now exposed as penetrable. Later that day, when President Bush arrived, he stepped from the limo and, together with Secretary Rumsfeld, made his way slowly toward the impact site. Along the way, both greeted dozens of assembled rescue workers, many of whom had been on the job nonstop. Well, this is going to be President Bush's longest public appearance since the prior day's events. and his presence became a rallying cry of sorts as the workers told him this dastardly act must not go unpunished. As President Bush grew closer to the impact site, he paused to let it all soak in. Seconds later, several firemen and workers unexpectedly unveiled a large American flag just to the right of where the American Airlines Flight 757 had pierced the Pentagon's exterior. As the flag unfurled, a wave of emotion and pride rippled throughout the assembled throng. Everyone applauded and cheered for a few moments and then grew silent once again. This is the president speaking to the press with the backdrop of the crash site behind him. Well, a couple of days later, on the morning of September 14th, began with a solemn ceremony at Washington National Cathedral, followed by President Bush's much-anticipated visit to Ground Zero. Well, that afternoon, as we helicoptered from McGuire Air Force Base, where Air Force One had landed, our senses were put to the test as soon as the New York skyline came into view. The smell emanating from lower Manhattan, which was on the horizon before us, was intense and thick. Only 3 days removed from the largest terrorist attack on American soil, the smoke and smolder would continue for weeks. Our military helicopter circled over Ground Zero for a few minutes so we could see the horror wrought by the collapse of the Twin Towers. We landed at the Wall Street heliport on the East River and quickly headed toward the motorcade. Now, whenever Marine One lifts or lands, a local fire department provides a truck and crew just in case of an accident. In this case, it was the FDNY. As we walked past the handful of firefighters, we could tell they had not just left the firehouse. They were covered in soot and grime and appeared exhausted. Our motorcade driver told us they had just come from Ground Zero, where they had been working for days searching for survivors with their fellow firefighters. After a few minutes of touring World Trade Center 7 with Mayor Giuliani, Governor Pataki, and other New York luminaries in tow, we headed to Ground Zero. It had rained that morning, and the rainwater had mixed with the remnants of the tons of drywall and had formed into a chalky paste, which was by now on everyone's shoes. Now, of all the visual scenes at Ground Zero, the run I recall the most is a stern look in the eyes of the firefighters, the policemen, and other first responders, who by now numbered in the hundreds. They were emotional and they were angry, as was to be expected. We all were, but this look went way beyond anger. This is President Bush consoling a battalion chief who lost his brother the day before. Well, I have to admit, once we got to Ground Zero, there wasn't much of a detailed plan, except for President Bush to greet and to thank as many people as possible. And with the Secret Service as close to the president as I had ever seen, except for Tuesday, September the 11th, we moved around within the assembled crowd. There was debris and chalky paste everywhere. Pieces of the fallen towers were strewn about, as were several crushed vehicles. I recall a flattened fire department vehicle that appeared to be an SUV. It too was covered in grime, and you could barely make out the bright red paint. Within minutes, White House Chief of Staff Andy Card told Karl Rove and I to go find a place from which the president could speak. So we headed back to the flattened car, which by now had several firefighters standing on top of it. It seemed sturdy enough, so I made my way back to Andy Card, who was standing next to President Bush. Within seconds, Mr. Card handed President Bush a bullhorn, and with that, the flying wedge of agents and staff pivoted toward the flattened vehicle. Now, the firefighters saw us heading in their direction, and they started jumping off the vehicle, except for one man who appeared older than his colleagues, so we told him to stay put. President Bush stepped onto the makeshift platform. He embraced the senior fireman and began to speak to an audience about America and our prayers for those whose lives were lost, and the workers at Ground Zero and the families who mourn. However, for those in the crowd, many could still not hear his remarks. In the distance, you could hear single voices yelling, "We can't hear you." And immediately, President Bush responded with a now historic phrase that has since been repeated countless times.
today, America today, is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Well, as you can imagine, a wave of euphoria overcame everyone. We quickly got back into the motorcade and sat there in complete silence. After a few minutes, someone verbalized what we were all thinking. Did that really just happen? We had just witnessed a profound moment in our history akin to those that you read about in elementary school textbooks. Later, we arrived at the Javits Convention Center and visited with many of the rescue workers who had come from all over the country, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Chicago, you name it. Inside were dozens of family members of policemen and firemen who were missing and presumed dead. We could hear the cries and occasional nervous laughter as each person told President and Mrs. Bush of their loved ones. One woman gave President Bush the police badge of her fallen son, and he vowed to carry it with him throughout his presidency. President Bush stayed with the families for close to 2 hours, talking with them and offering words of encouragement. That night, I returned home exhausted from what had been the most demanding week of my lifetime, and I suspect some of you felt the same way. I'd spent September the 11th traveling with the president. I'd visited the Pentagon crash site the next day and helped plan the National Cathedral event as well as our visit to Ground Zero. I took off my black dress shoes when I got home, which are still caked in mud and that chalky paste from Ground Zero. And by the way, I still was wearing a loaner FEMA jacket, which I still had on from earlier that day. Despite my best efforts over the next few days, I just couldn't bring myself to clean the shoes. So one evening, I wrapped the shoes in a plastic bag, placed them in a container where they remain untouched to this day. Well, all of us experienced a range of emotions that week and for months to follow, but certainly one of them stood out. That's our amazement and gratitude that we have people whose life calling is to be a fireman, a policeman, a first responder, or a member of the armed services. As we saw on September the 11th, and if we have witnessed since that day, their sacrifices were profound and their impact great. All these individuals are heroes by any measure of the word. And I often feel sometimes the word hero has become, well, we could say trite in today's world. But for lack of a better term, we'll call this being an everyday hero. Someone who disregards their own needs or interests in order to improve the situation of another. Selflessness in the face of adversity. Now, maybe my view is a bit dated, but I don't believe we should be anointing people as heroes for achievements on the playing field or movie screen. I think that term should be reserved for a fireman who runs up hundreds of steps in a burning building with 50 pounds of gear on his or her back, hoping to save someone's life they have never met. Or a group of passengers rushing a cockpit in order to take back a plane from terrorists whose sole desire was to kill more Americans. These are people to look up to. Well, I'm confident that all of you at some point in your life, in fact, for some of you it may have already happened, and for one of you it could be tonight or it might even be driving home after your 82nd birthday celebration at Denny's, that you will ask to be a hero or perhaps an everyday hero. And when that time comes, I challenge each of you to respond with generosity. Now, this is an event for which you can many times neither anticipate nor prepare for, or it might very well be right in front of you. Perhaps it's the work you do at your place of worship that comforts a distraught neighbor. or your efforts to convince a grieving elderly widow that she has many more sunrises ahead of her. Or you might even rescue a young man from a burning automobile after a wreck on the Beltway. But when you're able to meet the challenge, not only will you be helping someone else, but you will also be helping yourself. Now, we all know there are plenty of idioms and sayings out there about failure being the greatest teacher. Well, I don't discredit those sentiments. I would argue that our triumphs can teach us as much about ourselves as can our failures. Because when you make sacrifices for another, when you become someone's everyday hero, your triumphs become their triumphs. Putting your interests in life on hold to help out someone else is an act of valor, initiative, and altruism, three of life's greatest lessons. And you don't need a cape or a mask to learn them. I would hope that tomorrow you all remember the sacrifices that thousands of people made 17 years ago. Now, all those people responded with generosity, vulnerability, and selflessness, and are heroes by any measure of the word. Thank you. Thank you. Amy had said if somebody wanted to ask a question, if we have time, or happy in there. Or if some people want to offer some comments from their reflections on September the 11th as well. It looks like a satisfied crowd. Or a hungry crowd.
Your high schoolers take more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, thank you again. This concludes today's program. We want to thank all of you for joining us today as we pause to remember. It is important that we remember, and we appreciate you spending a part of your day with us. Thank you.